Welcome to HIT Podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As we do every week, we're dropping into your feed with what I hope are bite-sized, digestible, well-curated conversations going on in the space of human resources, insurance, and technology. This week's episode I'm super excited about. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions. And without any further ado, I bring in David Hoxworth. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Toby. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to have you here. So I know you're here with Bavy, you're here with Milliman, you're here on the podcast. Maybe do me a favor and just give the audience a real quick overview. Like, who's David? How do you find yourself in the chair? What are we here to talk about today?
Sure. I've been in the insurance industry for forever, 28 years now. And the last 19 years, I've been a solutions sales rep in the employee benefit space. Mm-hmm. And my title right now is Head of National Accounts with Bavy, which is Milliman's ICHRA solution.
Yeah, so Milliman, obviously, we were talking a little bit before the camera set up. I know them as kind of the actuarial services company and probably, literally the name in the game. Bavy, a brand that I'm glad you're on here to talk about, and specifically in this segment, you mentioned ICHRA that I'm really interested in diving into. Do you mind, let's just start from ground zero, like unpack the ICHRA, unpack kind of what we're even talking about.
Do you want to talk about ICHRA specifically?
Sure.
Yeah. So ICHRA is a newish form of employer-sponsored group medical plan. We're in our 6th year now of ICHRA. And
which is the individual coverage health reimbursement arrangement, right? The ICHRA.
Yeah, individual coverage HRAs. And the backbone of ICHRA is what makes them really different fundamentally is the defined contribution structure of them. So the employer's healthcare budget, health insurance budget, is no longer tethered to a specific plan, carrier, claims, all that stuff. What it is instead, it's based on the employer's decision of what they want to contribute. Yeah. Within affordability guidelines, of course, when applicable.
So let's get into the kind of individual coverage nature of this, because I'm interested in unpacking this for an employer that's listening, and maybe even listening at the level to where they're really, this is kind of a brand new thing for them, where what you propose in the ICHRA world, and jump in and I'll hum a few bars, you can sing the rest of the song, but whether it's the entire population or eligible, and we can get into eligible segments of the population, you kind of scrap the group health plan. You do not do a group medical plan. You say, guys, we're not doing our Kaiser, Aetna plans anymore. What we're doing is giving you money, and that's the defined contribution part you're talking about, giving you a certain amount of dollars, and you, Mr. and Ms. Employee, you go find the individual plan that sings to you, whatever coverage level, carrier, et cetera.
Absolutely. So it's kind of like a plot twist, right? With ICHRA. The actual coverage is not the group plan anymore. It's individual ACA health plans. Yeah. And the employee, what they get is a lot of choice. Now they have the choice and the responsibility to choose whatever plan they want, but they have a very wide range of plans and carriers and so on to choose from.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'll say is, there are some groups, I imagine, that you probably even have more experience with this, where they do it wholesale. They get rid of the employee benefits entirely. And then other groups where they say, hey, Toby, what did you say at the beginning about carving out certain groups? And maybe what calls to me is, let's say, for example, location carve out, because we've got most of our population in California, so our Kaiser or Aetna or whatever works. But boy, we got this handful of people down in Childersburg, Alabama, and we just don't have penetration down that way. So what we'd like to do is just tell them, hey, instead of a group health plan, we're going to give you X amount of dollars to go towards an individual plan.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most strategic elements of ICHRA is this employee classing piece of it that you're referring to. And there's strict government guidelines on how employers are allowed to class out employees. The most common ones we see are geographical rating areas, which are usually state by state. And then you also have salaried versus hourly, and full-time versus part-time. There's a few other ones, but those are the really, really common ones. And as you said, employers have a choice when they do ICHRA, depending on how slice and dice and what their employee population dynamic is, they could offer ICHRA to the whole population, but offer a different contribution to different classes. That's one way to do it. And that is strategic because the employer stands to save significantly when they do it that way. The other way to slice and dice is the employer can offer ICHRA to one or more classes and offer a traditional different type of group plan to the other class.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those are on the table with ICHRA. ICHRA really can solve problems that the other types of group plans just can't do because of the differences in the rules.
Yeah, you mentioned new-ish. I think, you probably know better than me, but we're literally talking like 5 to 7-ish years old from a legislative standpoint. Like the ability to even write these things is, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old from a legality.
Yeah, January 1st, 2020.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
We are just barely into our 6th year.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we talk about legislation and we talk about these being new-ish, I think what we might need to undo is institutional knowledge, right? Where some employers say, well, I remember learning all about this at XYZ date in my past, and I was told I have to have a group health plan to comply with healthcare reform legislation, and we're a large group, Toby. So maybe that fits for some small group, but I'm an applicable large employer, and I have to satisfy healthcare reform requirements.
Yeah, you know what? There is a myth out there that ICHRA is just for small groups, or ICHRA is just for when, in case of emergency break glass, that kind of a thing. Honestly, there's more value in ICHRA, generally speaking, for larger employers than smaller, because there's more of a strategic edge for things like employee classing, like we just talked about. For example, with a large employer, I'll give you an example. This was a really big success story. We had a fairly, kind of mid-sized, let's say, employer. It was 1,000+ employees across a few states. And they were on a self-funded plan. And the broker was a big self-funding broker. The employer loved the self-funding. They had been on it for 6 years. And the first 4 years, everything was running smoothly. Claims were great. They were having parties, right? And then year 5, it started to go sideways on them. Some claims started to get out of hand. But the renewal increase wasn't enough to trigger them to like, okay, we got to move to ICHRA. But then this past year, they were a 1-1 just now. They had another big increase, and basically the plan had blown up, right? So they came to us, and we looked at the census, and we noticed, okay, there's 4 different states here that the employees reside in, and we know that they like their self-funded plans. And by the way, Milliman does a lot of self-funding actuarial consulting work. So we have a soft spot in our hearts for self-funding too.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, you do.
So we did some inquiries and found out that the vast majority of the employees with the high claims were actually isolated in 2 out of the 4 states. And so we suggested to them, what about offering ICHRA for the 2 states where the claims are high and keeping your self-funded plan for the other 2? And they're like, we can do that? Like, yeah, you can. And so that's what they ended up doing. So they saved their self-funded plan, at least for about approximately half their employees, which they were happy about. And then the other 2, they don't have to worry about the claims. Yeah. So now it's with ICHRA.
Yeah, and that's what's fascinating is because, I want to be strategic without sounding like you're kind of gaming the system. But when you're in the self-funded space as an employer, you own those claims liabilities. And if there are folks that, for the sake of the plan, getting them onto like a community rated product where, listen, the individual world now is guaranteed issue, they're not going to be declined, et cetera. You can say, hey, look, we can carve out some of these higher cost claimants and maybe even do right by them by really giving them a good amount of premium to cover their plans, get them on a nice product, but their claims are now the problem of that individual pool and have nothing to do with our group.
Yeah. And the pool is really large, right?
Yeah.
So,
and
So there's no direct effect on renewal rates when it comes to ICHRA as far as claims goes, right?
Yeah, on the individual side,
Maybe,
you mean? Yeah.
yeah, maybe we can say there's an indirect, effect, right? Probably overall, but it's a very muted indirect effect. So there's no obvious direct effect as far as claims goes on in the individual renewals.
Right,
So
because what you're saying is the individual market itself is just going to get its
yeah,
community rated 7, 9, 10%, and that's just
yeah,
going to tick, 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 tick. And so you as an employer need to see, is my $500 or whatever still going as far? But yeah,
yeah. The great couple great things about the fact that the coverage of ICHRA is individual ACA plans. One we just talked about. Another one is that the renewal rates are not only consistent, they're also about half or almost half of what the typical group rate renewal increase is. So it's like 6 or 7% average. And we all know, fully insured level funding, typically it's 10, 12%. And then there's never any big scary renewals that come out of nowhere and like, oh my gosh, that was massive and we can't recover from this. It's unsustainable. So employers can dial in 6, 7, 8%, let's say, and it's going to be accurate. They're going to have control and predictability now over their healthcare budget, their group healthcare budget. The
so
other thing about individual plans that's a big advantage is that there's no participation requirements
right,
either, right? There's
right.
no participation requirements. So if there's a group, an employer group that struggles with participation, this is a great answer.
So talk to me about, and I kind of teased the healthcare reform question. We got into the idea that this is for large group and small groups, but didn't really hit the nail on the head.
Mhm.
Their requirement to furnish health insurance, they being an applicable large employer, is
Mhm.
satisfied purely by the offering of either a group plan or an ICHRA. The ICHRA population
Mhm.
counts. So let's say, like you said, you've got half in one state, half in another, and for whatever reason, the group health plan fits for this half, and the other half, you're going to do an ICHRA. Now, old school thinking is that, well, that means you're not offering them group insurance. That means for half your population, you're telling them to go buy an individual plan. That means you're out of compliance. But what I want to just really like black and white say yay or nay, like you're in compliance if you simply offer them the ICHRA.
Yes, ICHRA is considered group medical insurance.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Legally, and it really is the structure of it is a group plan. The coverage is individual, but the
So that's what I
structure
want to
is
get into
group.
nuts and bolts a little bit there, because now we're thinking like, oh God, but I got 1,000 plans out there running around. So A,
Mhm.
structure, but B, because you guys are a branch of Milliman, I assume most of your interactions are a good broker knows of Bevy, and we're working together to strategize with the employer. Are you guys helping? Let's say when we talk about the contribution modeling, for example, and they say, hey, how much do I give? What does that look like? How do my employees enroll? Like, what are the logistics surrounding? I want to partner with Bevy for a section of my employees on an ICHRA.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. It's one of the big differentiators with Bavy by Milliman when it comes to ICHRA versus what else is out there in the marketplace. We're the only one that where Milliman's actuaries are doing, they're actually performing the financial analysis for the ICHRA itself, and they're working to optimize the ICHRA, contributions to make it optimized for not only the employer but for the collective employees and even each employee on the census on a granular level. They're looking at that level of depth, and so we're going to come back to the employer with here's the minimum you could contribute for affordability, but we're also going to tell them this is what we think you should do to optimize this plan, and here's why, and we're going to show it to them in black and white.
Yeah, I kind of want to say that again or hear that again. So you guys will help an employer understand how they will satisfy affordability clauses.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we go through a lot of analytics first of all, and then we put together a proposal presentation, and then we review it with the broker and the employer.
Yeah. So then let's say we've looked at it. You guys give us a good number. We like all this. We move forward. How do I roll this out? So let's say again, it's just one state of my population. It's just my Alabama folks. how do I roll this out to them? What does their enrollment look like? What is me tracking and knowing what plans they're on? Like, help me get my head around that.
Yeah, so the great thing about our full service model is that we pretty much do all the heavy lifting rather. The broker is still very involved at the group level, the strategic level, and so forth. But when it comes to the employee enrollment part, when it comes to the communication part of it, and it's a big deal when there's a change like this, going from a traditional group plan to ICHRA. There are a lot of differences at the employee level of what's going to happen. And so there's a lot of communication pieces that we put together, and we assign an account manager that will actually handhold that employer and the brokers through that whole implementation process. Mainly, it's all about the communication and certain action steps. And then when it comes time for the actual employee enrollment, we have built our own enrollment platform, which is very user-friendly, has lots of tools so the employee can navigate and do things like healthcare provider search, prescription search, all the plans are in there, robust plan information. But the best thing about our enrollment system is our one-on-one licensed enrollment counselors that will assist. Because when when an employee logs in and they see 85 plans, that can be a little overwhelming. So we definitely want employees to utilize that service. These are all W-2 Milliman employees, all US based.
Yeah. And so the employee then picks their plan, pays for it out of pocket, and the employer gives them a stipend on their paycheck, right? Talk to me about those logistics.
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked that. And a lot of ICHRA administrators do it in some form like that. And, that's a reimbursement. After all, the R in ICHRA does stand for reimbursement, right? But you don't have to actually perform it that way. So Bavy by Milliman does it a little differently. So we have set it up so that the employees pay the way that they're used to with any other group plan. They're going to pay via payroll deduction.
Mm-hmm.
So they're never going to pay directly to the carrier and then have to get reimbursed. They're paying through payroll deduction.
And not to get too in the weeds, but is this a post-tax deduction?
Good question. So the employer dollars are always pre-tax. The employee dollars are pre-tax as long as they enroll in an off-exchange plan, which is what we have on the Bavy platform. We do have some situations where the employee just doesn't find the carrier or the plan that they're looking for off exchange on our platform. We will even assist them to go onto the exchange, find a different plan out there, and then bring it inside to the ICHRA so that it's still part of the payroll deduction.
Yeah, in my experience, and I don't do a ton of individual stuff, but the off exchange and on exchange plans, there's a huge overlap. Like many of them, the exact same plans, exact same price.
Yeah.
People just go on the exchange because that's where they can use any ACA tax credits should they qualify for them. But that would not be the case here, obviously, with NICRA because they're getting employer funding towards that.
Yeah, you're correct with that. And the plans are either identical or equivalent. Yes. And including the pricing, they're all equivalent or identical.
So the way you guys set it up is you basically go to the employers, help them set the amount that they should contribute, also let them know what the minimums are, who the eligible class is, why we might target these classes. Then we roll these things out to the employee. They've got a user-friendly shopping experience with a Bavy-backed counselor to kind of help them out through this stuff. They just enroll, and then the way it's funded is, do you guys do like a consolidated bill then, where each of the carriers bill you guys, you bill the client then does all those payroll deductions? Kind of talk me through that logistic.
So that's the other half of the payment management piece of it. So what we do is we set up a holding account for the employer behind the scenes, and then that account has a sub account for each enrolled employee. So the employer is going to pay their monthly bill just like they would to a carrier or a TPA, but instead it's going to go into this holding account. Then each individual carrier is going to pull their monthly premium for each employee from those sub accounts.
Yeah. So the employer funds it on the front end, makes themselves whole via the payroll deduction. And then there's all these little like access points that the individual plans get to sweep for their $600 or $800 or whatever.
Yep. It's all automated and it's very smooth.
And then the only thing you're deducting from the employee would be obviously an overage relative to the employer's contribution. Now, let's say, for example, the employer says we give $500 a month and this employee finds a plan at $300. Are they owed the $200 surplus? Does it just say, hey, look, we offered you free insurance up to $500? Talk to me about when it goes in the other direction.
Yeah, so the employer can decide to give them the full amount no matter what their premium is if it's lower. As far as BAVI is concerned, in our system, anything that's not used is therefore the employer's. The employee doesn't. The employer on their own could still give it to them in a different way.
Yeah.
But within our system, it's
by the way, similar to group insurance, where it's like, hey, let's say you sign up for employee only, and we want the deduction for employee only to be $10 a month. Maybe that means we're only paying $400 for this. Where if you sign up for employee plus family, we wanted that deduction to be $500, except the plan's $2,000. So we're contributing $1,000 to this guy and only $400 to this guy. You don't get that leftover amount. You just join whatever plan you want, and you either get the health insurance for free, or if you have a deduction, then you see just what that deduction is.
Yeah, 100%. You nailed it.
Yeah. Man, I'm so glad to have this conversation. I feel like we unpacked so much in a tight time frame. The premise of the show is to try to be bite-sized, try to be quick and brief. So maybe just giving you a chance. Is there anything else on BAVI, Milliman, ICHRAs in general that you want to say to kind of bring us home?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that Milliman is a very respected name for good reason within the insurance industry. And we do things a little different, where our MO is to provide the highest possible value as well as the highest possible level of customer experience. And so our model is very full service. And if that's the kind of experience that people want in this business, then definitely check us out.
I appreciate that so much. And I guess for full disclosure, there's no financial relationship. This isn't like a sponsored pay. This is just me saying, I really like the premise of ICHRAs and to bring good content to our audience. And I think you make for such a great expert, and you guys do come at this from such a helpful and unique angle that I kind of wanted you to be the guy to help us shed some light on ICHRAs today. So David, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Toby. Pleasure's mine.
Appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for joining us. Join us every week. We're trying to have these great conversations, bring them to you. Today's episode is sponsored by TrueHue and Excel Health. Thank you to those guys. We appreciate you guys watching the numbers go up every week. So thank you guys for joining into this podcast. Join us next week. Join us every week. And until next week, make this the best week yet.